My parents stole $75,000 from my savings to buy my 18-year-old sister a luxury car. And when I refused to sign over the deed to my house, they tried to have me committed to a psychiatric ward to silence me. I am currently hiding in my own home, shaking with rage and heartbreak, because I just had to serve a restraining order against the people who raised me. They call me a monster for choosing my bank account over their well-being, but they seem to forget that my sister stole my identity and ruined my credit score just to buy designer handbags. I am staring at the legal documents that will effectively destroy their lives, leaving my parents homeless and my sister with a permanent criminal record. My heart is shattered into a million pieces, but my head tells me this is the only way to survive their parasitic abuse. How do you choose between destroying your family or destroying yourself? Please, tell me, what would you have done in my position? My name is Margaret Sterling, but to the people who sign my paychecks and the few acquaintances I tolerate, I am simply Meg. I am 24 years old, a senior financial analyst for a boutique investment firm in downtown Seattle. To the outside observer, my life is a meticulously curated exhibition of the American dream. I have a credit score of 820, a pristine criminal record, and a penthouse apartment on the 35th floor that overlooks the weeping, gray skyline of the Pacific Northwest. I have no husband to answer to, no children to clean up after, and until this evening, I operated under the blissful, self-imposed delusion that I had no family. The rain in Seattle does not wash things clean. It just makes everything slick and dangerous. I was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window of my living room, watching the traffic crawl on the wet asphalt below. The glass was cool against my forehead. Behind me, my apartment was silent. It was a silence I had paid for, dearly. Silence is the most expensive commodity in the world when you grow up in a house where screaming is the primary form of communication. My apartment is sterile. That is the word my mother would use if she ever saw it. I prefer the word controlled. The walls are painted a shade of white called dove wing. The furniture is Italian leather, stiff and cold. There are no family photographs on the mantle, no knickknacks gathering dust, no evidence that a human being with a messy heart lives here. Everything has a place. Everything is accounted for. I walked to the kitchen island, the marble cool under my fingertips. A bottle of expensive Pinot Noir sat open, breathing next to a single crystal glass. Beside the wine was a small, orange prescription bottle, alprazolam, my chemical anchor. My doctor calls it a necessary intervention for high-functioning anxiety. I call it the only way I can stop my brain from calculating the probability of disaster every 3 seconds. I shook one pill into my palm, swallowed it dry, and waited for the static in my head to lower its volume. It was 11:45 at night when the intrusion began. My phone, which I leave on Do Not Disturb after 8 o'clock, began to vibrate against the glass coffee table. The sound was offensive in the quiet room. It buzzed like an angry hornet. I stared at the screen, and my stomach dropped, a physical sensation of free fall that no amount of medication could numb. The caller identification read, Mother. I had not spoken to her in 6 months. The last time we spoke, she had asked for $500 to fix the transmission on her car. A car I knew she had sold 2 years ago. I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. The persistence was a signal. My mother did not call late at night to ask how I was. She called to collect debts I did not owe. I picked up the phone. Hello, Mother, I said. My voice was steady, practiced, It was the voice I used when presenting bad quarterly projections to aggressive clients. Margaret, thank God. She breathed out. She sounded breathless, frantic. It was a performance I knew well. It was the damsel in distress act, usually followed by the guilt trip encore. I am working early tomorrow, I said, cutting off her opening monologue. What do you need? It is your sister, she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Bella is in trouble. My hand tightened around the phone. Bella. The name itself tasted like saccharin on my tongue. Bella, who was 18, beautiful, and possessed the survival instincts of a parasite. What did she do? I asked. Did she get arrested? No. How can you think so little of your own flesh and blood? My mother sounded offended, but the undercurrent of panic remained. There was just a Sayuting Tuhash is greater than misunderstanding at her dorms. The University Housing Board is being unreasonable. They kicked her out. Margaret, tonight, can you believe the cruelty? I closed my eyes. I could believe it perfectly. Bella had likely thrown a party, broken property, or simply refused to follow basic rules because she believed rules were suggestions for ugly people. So she is coming home to you? I asked. Already knowing the answer, we do not have the room, and you know your father's heart condition cannot take the stress, she said quickly. Too quickly. Besides, we are 4 hours away from campus. You are in the city. You have that big, empty apartment. Sayuting howling. Due cancelletto e maggiore di no. The word hung in the air, absolute and sharp. Margaret, she is your sister. She is standing on a curb in the rain. I looked out my window. The rain was coming down in sheets now. I felt a twinge of something in my chest. Guilt? No. It was conditioned reflex. It was the button they had installed in me since birth. She can get a hotel. I will transfer points for 1 night. 1 night. Mother, she is already in the Uber. My mother said, her voice hardening. The frantic tone evaporated, replaced by the steely entitlement that I loathed. She is 5 minutes away. She has the address. Do not be a monster. Margaret, she is just a child. The line went dead. I stood there, the phone warm in my hand. I looked around my sanctuary, the white sofa, the clean counters, the silence. It felt fragile suddenly, like thin ice. I took a sip of wine, but it tasted like vinegar. 5 minutes passed, then 10. I tried to convince myself I would not open the door. I would leave the chain on. I would call the police if I had to. I was a different person now. I was Meg Sterling, senior analyst. I was not the scared little girl who hid in the closet while my parents threw plates at each other. Then came the pounding. It was not a knock. It was a series of heavy, rhythmic thuds against the solid oak of my front door. Bam, bam, bam. I walked to the door, my legs feeling heavy. I checked the peephole. The fisheye lens distorted the image, but the chaos was undeniable. Bella was standing in the hallway. She was soaking wet. She was wearing a pink faux fur coat that looked like a drowned rat, but it was the luggage that made my breath hitch. There were 5 suitcases, 5 massive, hard-shell suitcases stacked around her like a barricade, and perched on top of the largest one was a Louis Vuitton carrier bag, from which a small, trembling chihuahua was barking shrilly. I unlocked the deadbolt. The sound was loud, a metallic click that signaled surrender. I opened the door. Bella looked up from her phone. Her makeup was a tragedy of running mascara and smeared lipstick, but her eyes were clear. They were blue, sharp, and utterly devoid of humility. "Took you long enough," she said. She did not say hello. She did not say thank you. She pushed past me, dragging the first suitcase with a grunt of exertion. The wheel of the suitcase rolled over my foot, pinching the skin. But she did not notice, or she did not care. "Bella," I said, my voice tight. "What is all this?" "My stuff." "Obviously," she said, dropping the bag on my hardwood floor. The wet wheels left muddy streaks on the polished timber. "God, it is freezing in here. Do you not believe in heating? And why is it so quiet? It is like a morgue." She turned back to the hallway and began hauling the rest of the bags inside. The Chihuahua jumped out of its carrier and immediately began sniffing the leg of my expensive leather armchair. I stood by the open door, paralyzed. Down the hallway, I saw a door open. Mrs. Higgins, the president of the Homeowners Association, stepped out in her silk robe. She looked at the muddy suitcases, the barking dog, and then at me. Her expression was a mixture of shock and vindication. She had always suspected I did not belong here, and now she had proof. "I am sorry, Mrs. Higgins," I whispered. I pulled the last suitcase inside and shut the door, closing out the judgment of my neighbor, but locking myself in with something far worse. Bella had already made herself at home. She had thrown her wet coat onto the sofa, my white Italian leather sofa. She was walking around the living room, picking up objects, inspecting them, and putting them down in the wrong places. "Nice place," she said, though her tone suggested it was barely adequate. "A bit small for a penthouse, is it not? Mom said you were rich. I am comfortable." "Bella, there is a difference." She laughed. It was a cruel, tinkling sound. She walked over to the kitchen island and picked up my wine glass. My wine glass. She took a large gulp, leaving a greasy smear of pink lipstick on the crystal rim. "Whatever," she said, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. "Mom said you would help me get back on my feet. I am going to need your credit card for some essentials." The Uber driver was a creep, so I gave him a 1-star rating, but I tipped him with your account number because I lost my wallet. "Hope you do not mind." I stared at her. The audacity was so immense, so breathtakingly casual, that I could not form words. She had not been in my house for 5 minutes, and she had already violated my space, insulted my home, and spent my money. I looked at the mud on the floor. I looked at the lipstick on the glass. I looked at the orange pill bottle on the counter. And for the first time in years, I wondered if there were enough pills in there to make me sleep through the nightmare that was about to unfold. This was not a visit. This was an invasion. And as Bella kicked off her wet boots, sending one flying into the wall, leaving a dark scuff mark on the dove wing paint, I realized the red flags were not just waving, they were burning. I had let the vampire in, and she was already thirsty. It took exactly 72 hours for Bella to dismantle the ecosystem I had spent 4 years perfecting. My apartment, once a sanctuary of minimalist design and acoustic peace, now smelled like a combination of stale pepperoni grease and cheap vanilla body spray. The visual assault was even worse. There were empty cardboard boxes from pizza deliveries stacked precariously on my coffee table, leaving circular grease stains on the surface I used to polish weekly with specialty wood cleaner. My throw pillows, hand-woven and imported, were scattered across the floor like the debris of a small explosion. I stood in the entryway, my briefcase heavy in my hand. The thermostat on the wall read 80 degrees. I could hear the hum of the air conditioning unit fighting a losing battle against the heating system. which Bella had apparently decided needed to run simultaneously because she liked the air to feel tropical. I did the mental math instantly. My electric bill would triple by the end of the month. I walked to the kitchen. The sink was full. It was not just dirty dishes. It was a graveyard of culinary incompetence. There were pans with burnt residue stuck to the bottom, cereal bowls with milk that had begun to curdle, and sticky spoons glued to my granite countertop. "Bella?" I called out. Silence answered me. I walked down the hall to the guest bathroom, which Bella had commandeered. The door was open. I stepped inside and felt my breath hitch in my throat. My La Mer moisturizing cream, a jar that cost $350 and usually lasted me 6 months, was sitting open on the edge of the sink. It was empty. The white porcelain of the basin was smeared with the thick, expensive cream, mixed with clumps of hair and foundation. She had used a $300 face cream to shave her legs. My hands trembled. This was not just messiness. This was violence against my property. It was a deliberate, careless consumption of things I had worked 80-hour weeks to afford. I needed to find her. I needed to explain the basic concepts of respect and boundaries before I evicted her onto the street. I pushed open the door to my bedroom. I had told her this room was off limits. I had made it very clear on the first night, but the door was ajar. Bella was standing in front of my full-length mirror. She was holding her phone up, pouting her lips for a selfie. The flash went off, illuminating the room for a split second. She was wearing my dress. It was a vintage silk slip dress, a shimmering champagne color that I had bought at an auction 2 years ago. I had never worn it. I was saving it for a special occasion that never came. Or perhaps I was just waiting until I felt worthy of such elegance. Bella turned and saw me. She did not jump. She did not look guilty. She simply lowered the phone and sighed. "You are home early," she said. "Take it off." I said. My voice was low, vibrating with a rage I had not felt since I was 16 years old. "Chill out, Meg," she said, turning back to the mirror and adjusting the strap. "It fits me better anyway. You are too skinny for this cut. You have no curves. It just hangs on you like a sack. You are stretching the seams. Bella, take it off. Now." She rolled her eyes, a gesture so practiced it seemed painful. "You are such a hoarder. You have all this nice stuff and you just let it rot in the closet. It is pathetic. I am doing the dress a favor by letting it be seen." I stepped forward. I did not want to touch her, but the urge to rip the silk from her body was overwhelming. "Get out of my room," I said, "and if you ever touch my things again, I will throw your suitcases off the balcony." Bella laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. "You would not dare. Mom would kill you." The mention of our mother was like a bucket of ice water. It reminded me of my role. I was the responsible one. I was the fixer. I was the one who absorbed the chaos, so the family image remained pristine. Bella sauntered past me, bumping her shoulder against mine. As she left the room, she tossed a comment over her shoulder. "By the way, I borrowed your other card, the black one in the desk drawer. I needed to order some supplies for my job interviews." My blood ran cold. The black card was my emergency reserve. It was a high-limit credit card I kept for medical emergencies or natural disasters. It was hidden in a locked drawer in my home office. I ran to the office. The drawer had been pried open with something sharp, likely a butter knife. The card was gone. I pulled out my phone and logged into the banking application. My fingers were shaking so badly I mistyped my password twice. When the screen finally loaded, The pending transaction sat at the top of the list like a neon sign. $2,400. The merchant was a luxury handbag retailer. I felt bile rise in my throat. $2,000. That was not supplies. That was theft. I stormed out into the living room. Bella was on the sofa, scrolling through Instagram, eating an apple and letting the peels fall onto the floor. "You bought a handbag?" I screamed. The control I prided myself on shattered. "You stole my credit card and bought a designer bag?" Bella did not look up. "I needed it," she said calmly. "You needed a $2,000 bag to get a job? Are you applying to be a trophy wife?" She finally looked at me, her eyes narrowing. "Appearances matter, Meg. Not everyone wants to look like a depressed librarian. I need to project success to attract success. You should know that. You work in finance. I am calling the police." I said. I reached for my phone. "Go ahead," she challenged. "Call the cops on your little sister. See how that looks?" I hesitated. She saw it. She smiled. I dialed a number, but it was not the police. It was my parents. My father answered on the second ring. "Hello, Margaret," he boomed. His voice sounded jovial, a stark contrast to the acid in my stomach. "Dad, Bella stole my credit card," I said, skipping the pleasantries. "She broke into my desk and spent $2,000 on a purse. I want her out. Tonight." There was a pause on the line. I could hear the television in the background, the familiar sound of a game show. "Now, Margaret, let us not be dramatic," he said slowly. "Stole is a very strong word." She took it without asking. "Dad, that is the definition of theft." "She called your mother about it," he said. "We discussed it. Bella is in a fragile state right now. She has been traumatized by the expulsion. She needs a confidence boost. We told her it was okay to borrow a little money to get herself set up." "Borrow?" I choked out a laugh. Since when is theft considered borrowing? And $2,000 is not a little money. That is 2 months of rent for some people. You have plenty of money. "Margaret," my mother chimed in. She must have been listening on the extension. "We know how much you make. You are always so secretive about it. But we know. Why are you so greedy?" "It is ugly." I stared at the wall. The accusation hit me with physical force. Greedy. I was the one who had worked since I was 16. I was the one who put myself through college with scholarships and 3 part-time jobs, while Bella went to private cheerleading camps. "She broke into my desk," I repeated, my voice trembling. "She is your sister," my mother shouted. "Families share. You are acting like she is a stranger. She is just trying to get back on her feet. And you are counting pennies. Do you want her to fail? Is that it? Are you jealous because she is young and has potential?" The gaslighting was masterful. Within 2 minutes, they had turned a felony into a character flaw on my part. I was not the victim of theft. I was the oppressor of a vulnerable child. I looked at Bella. She was watching me, a smug little smirk playing on her lips. She knew exactly what they were saying. She knew she had won before the game even started. "Fine," I said. My voice was cold, detached. I felt something snap inside me. It was a small fracture, a hairline crack in the foundation of my loyalty. "Keep the bag, but she pays me back every cent when she gets a job." She will," my father said dismissively. "Just help her with the resume." "Margaret, stop being so difficult." I hung up the phone. I looked at Bella. She took another bite of the apple and dropped the core onto my white rug. "See?" she said. "I told you they would understand." I did not scream. I did not throw her out. I simply walked back to my bedroom and locked the door. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the empty space in the closet where the silk dress used to hang. They thought I was difficult. They thought I was greedy. They thought I would just absorb this, like I had absorbed every other slight and injustice for 2 decades. But they were wrong. I opened my laptop. I did not go to work. Instead, I opened a new spreadsheet. I typed Bella's name at the top. Underneath, I entered the date and the amount, $2,400. Then, I opened a folder I had not looked at in years. It was labeled Family Assets. I began to type. If they wanted to talk about money, if they wanted to talk about what was owed, then we would talk about it. I would count every penny. I would document every sin. The first crack had appeared in the dam, and through it, a cold, dark water was beginning to seep. The following morning, I did not go to the office. I called my assistant, Sarah, and told her I was taking a personal day. It was the first unplanned absence I had taken in 3 years. Sarah was so shocked, she asked if I had been in a car accident. In a way, I had. The crash just had not happened on the highway. It had happened in my living room. I sat in my home office, a small room off the hallway that I kept locked. This was my command center. 3 monitors hummed on the desk, casting a cool, blue light across my face. On the screen in front of me was the login portal for the university Bella had been attending until 48 hours ago. Bella had left her laptop open on the kitchen island amidst the ruins of her breakfast. It was a careless mistake, typical of someone who had never experienced consequences. I had taken the liberty of retrieving her password from the browser's saved settings. It was simply Bella123. The lack of security was almost insulting. I navigated to the student bursar account. My mother had said it was a misunderstanding. She had said the housing board was being unreasonable. I wanted to see the truth in black and white. Numbers do not lie. People lie. Numbers just wait to be counted. The page loaded. I stared at the balance in the center of the screen. Past due, $24,500. I blinked. I leaned closer to the screen, analyzing the line items. Tuition had not been paid for 2 full semesters. Housing fees were delinquent. There were fines listed for damage to property and unsanctioned gatherings totaling $4,000. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. This was not a clerical error. This was gross negligence. But a question began to form in my mind, a logical inconsistency that did not fit the data set. The college fund, it was the one thing my parents had always held over our heads as proof of their benevolence. When my grandmother passed away 10 years ago, she left a significant sum. My parents had set up a trust, a generic education fund that was supposed to cover undergraduate degrees for both me and Bella. I had never touched my half. I had earned a full academic scholarship to the University of Washington, and I worked as a waitress to cover my living expenses. My parents had told me they would save my share for a down payment on a house one day, or perhaps for graduate school. If the fund existed, why was Bella $24,000 in debt to the university? Why was she stealing my credit cards for purses if there was a 6-figure account sitting in her name? I spun my chair around. Behind me, on the floor, was one of the boxes Bella had dragged in. It was labeled important stuff in pink marker. The cardboard was torn at the corner. I had seen her toss a stack of mail into it yesterday while she was unpacking. I knelt on the floor and opened the box. It smelled of stale perfume and dust. I sifted through the chaos. There were old birthday cards, crumpled receipts for fast food, a broken hair straightener, and a tangled mess of jewelry. At the bottom, buried under a pile of glossy fashion magazines, was a thick envelope. It was addressed to my parents, Mr. and Mrs. Sterling, but it had been opened and stuffed into this box. The return address was a collection agency based in Nevada. I pulled the letter out. My hands were steady, but my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I unfolded the paper. It was a notice of default and intent to repossess. The subject of the repossession was a vehicle, a Range Rover Evoque. I froze. A Range Rover. I remembered the car. Bella had driven it home last Thanksgiving. It was brand new, white with a black leather interior. When I asked about it, my father had puffed out his chest and said it was a lease, a gift from his brother, Uncle Jerry, who owned a dealership. He said Uncle Jerry gave them a special family rate of almost nothing. I looked at the numbers on the repossession notice. The outstanding balance was $68,000. The loan was in my father's name, but the co-signer listed at the bottom was not Uncle Jerry. It was the Sterling Family Educational Trust. I dropped the letter. It fluttered to the floor, landing face up. The logo of the collection agency seemed to mock me. I turned back to my computer. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I needed to access the trust account. I had not looked at it in years because I trusted them. That was my fatal flaw. In my world of risk assessment and due diligence, I had failed to vet the two people who raised me. I found the bank website. I did not have the password, but I had my father's social security number memorized from when I did their taxes 5 years ago. I clicked Forgot Password. I answered the security questions. What is your mother's maiden name? What was the name of your first pet? The answers were easy. The screen loaded. I navigated to the transaction history. I selected the date range. All time. The spreadsheet that generated was a roadmap of betrayal. The account opening balance. 5 years ago, $150,000. This was the money my grandmother had left. $75,000 for me. $75,000 for Bella. I scrolled down. 4 years ago, withdrawal of $40,000. Description: wire transfer, Prestige Wellness Global. I paused. Prestige Wellness Global. I recognized the name. It was a multi-level marketing scheme involving nutritional supplements that had collapsed under a federal investigation last year. My parents had invested $40,000 of our education money into a pyramid scheme. 3 years ago, withdrawal of $10,000. Description: cash. 2 years ago, withdrawal of $20,000. Description: luxury cruise lines. I remembered that cruise. My parents had gone to the Mediterranean for their anniversary. They told me they had won the tickets in a raffle at the local Rotary Club. I had even bought them new luggage as a gift. They had used my own money to sail around Greece while I was eating ramen noodles and working double shifts at the library. I scrolled to the bottom. 1 year ago, withdrawal of $70,000. Description: automotive down payment, the Range Rover. I looked at the final balance in the bottom right corner of the screen, $18.42. I sat back in my chair. The silence in the room was deafening. The hum of the computer fans sounded like a jet engine. They had stolen everything. It was not just about the money. It was about the lie. For years, they had called me cheap. They had called me obsessive. When I refused to buy expensive gifts or fly home for every minor holiday, they called me selfish. They told the extended family that I was a miser who hoarded her wealth while her poor parents struggled on a fixed income. But all the while, they were draining my inheritance. They were driving a car bought with my future. They were vacationing on my security. And Bella, I looked at the repossession letter on the floor. Bella knew. She had the letter. She had hidden it in her box. She knew the car was being repossessed because the money ran out. She knew the tuition was not paid because the well was dry. She knew why she was here. In my apartment, eating my food and wearing my clothes. She was not here because she missed her big sister. She was not here because of a misunderstanding at the dorms. She was here because I was the new host. The previous host, the trust fund, was dead. They had sucked it dry, and now they needed a fresh vein to tap. I felt a sensation I had never experienced before. It was not anger. Anger is hot. It burns and consumes. This was cold. It was a glacial shift in my chest. It was the feeling of a bridge collapsing, stone by stone, into a dark river. I printed the documents. The printer whirred to life, spitting out page after page of evidence. The bank statements, the withdrawal records, the repossession notice, the tuition debt. I stapled them together into a neat, thick packet. I stood up and walked out of my office. I walked down the hallway to the living room. Bella was awake now. She was lying on the sofa, watching a reality television show about rich housewives. She was eating a bowl of cereal, and milk was dripping onto her chin. She looked up as I entered. "Hey," she said, her mouth full. "Do we have any more almond milk? This oat stuff tastes like cardboard." I looked at her. I really looked at her. I did not see my little sister anymore. I did not see the baby I used to push on the swings. I saw a co-conspirator. I saw a beneficiary of theft. I walked over to the television and pulled the plug from the wall. The screen went black. "Hey," Bella yelled, sitting up. "What is your problem?" I was watching that. I did not speak. I tossed the packet of papers onto her lap. It landed with a heavy thud. "What is this?" she asked, looking down at the stack. "Read it," I said. She picked up the top page. I saw her eyes scan the bank logo. I saw the recognition flicker in her pupils when she saw the balance. $18. She did not look surprised. She looked annoyed. "So," she said, tossing the papers onto the table, "you found out Mom and Dad are bad with money. Big deal. Everyone knows that. It was my money." "Bella," I said, "my share of Grandma's money, and yours." She shrugged. The gesture was so dismissive it made my hands curl into fists. "It is family money, Meg. It all goes into the same pot." Dad said, "The investment just did not work out. It happens. You are rich now anyway. Why do you care about some old money from Grandma? You are doing fine." I stared at her. The entitlement was a fortress. Logic could not breach it. Morality could not scale it. She truly believed that my success obligated me to fund their failures. She believed that because I had built something, they had the right to tear it down for parts. "You knew," I said softly. "You knew they bought you that car with my money. It was my car too," she snapped, her voice rising to a whine. "I needed a safe car for campus. Dad said it was safer than a sedan." "Do you want me to die in a crash? Is that it?" The manipulation was seamless. Pivot from theft to safety. Pivot from guilt to victimhood. "Get your phone," I said. "Xiao Yi Jing Hao Ling. 2# is greater than what? Get your phone. Call them. Put it on speaker." "I am not calling them," she said, crossing her arms. "They are stressed enough. If you do not call them, I will call the police and report the theft of my credit card." I said, "And then I will show them these bank statements and report the theft of the trust fund. That is grand larceny. Bella, Dad will go to prison. Her face went pale. For the first time, the arrogance cracked. She saw the look in my eyes. She saw that the safety net was gone. She pulled her phone out of her pocket. Her fingers trembled as she dialed. "Hello?" My mother's voice chirped through the speaker. "Bella, honey, is everything okay? Is Margaret being mean to you?" Bella looked at me. I gestured for her to speak. "Mom," she said, her voice shaking. "Meg knows." "Knows what?" "About the money, the trust fund, the car, everything." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Static hissed in the air. Then, my mother's voice changed. It lost its sweetness. It became sharp, brittle, and dangerous. "Put her on," she said. I took the phone from Bella's hand. "Hello, Mother," I said. "Margaret, listen to me," she began, her tone urgent. "You are confused. You are looking at numbers without context. The context is $18. I said, "We borrowed it," she screamed. The volume made me pull the phone away from my ear. "We borrowed it to keep the family afloat. Your father made some bad calls." "Yes, but we did it for the family. And we bought the car for your sister because she needed it. You were already established. You did not need the help. Why are you so selfish? You stole $75,000 from me." I said, "And you stole $75,000 from Bella, though she seems fine with it because she got a car out of the deal. It is not stealing when it is family." My father's voice roared in the background. I could hear him wrestling for the phone. "Ungrateful brat. We raised you. We put food on your table for 18 years. You owe us everything. I owe you nothing," I said. My voice was eerily calm. I felt like I was watching a stranger conduct this conversation. "You listen to me." My father panted into the receiver. "You are going to calm down. You are going to let your sister stay there. And you are going to help us refinance the debt on the house. If you try to sue us, if you try to drag our name through the mud, we will tell everyone about your episodes. We will tell your boss about the time you were institutionalized in college. Remember that? Saüdzingholing. Zwei Raute ist größer als ich froß." My episode, the panic attack I had in my sophomore year, brought on by exhaustion from working 3 jobs. I had spent 3 days in a campus wellness center to sleep. They had twisted that moment of weakness into a weapon. "You would blackmail me?" I whispered. "We are protecting the family," my mother said, her voice regaining that sickeningly sweet composure. "We are just doing what is best for everyone. Now, stop this nonsense. Apologize to your sister and transfer $5,000 to her account so she can pay off those school fees. We cannot have a Sterling with a bad credit record." The line went dead. I looked at the phone. Then I looked at Bella. She was smiling again. It was a small, tentative smile, but it was there. She thought they had won. She thought the threat had worked. She thought I was afraid. But I was not afraid. The fear had evaporated with the last $18 in that account. I looked at Bella, and then I looked at the window. The rain had stopped. The city was gray and hard and cold. I walked to the kitchen and picked up the packet of evidence. I walked to my shredder. Bella watched me, her eyes widening in delight. "Good choice, Meg," she said. "Family first, right?" I fed the papers into the shredder. The machine gnashed its teeth, slicing the truth into thin, unreadable strips. "Yes," I said, watching the paper disappear. "Family first." But inside my head, a different voice was speaking. It was a voice I had suppressed for a long time. It was the voice of the monster they claimed I was. "If you want a war," the voice whispered, "I will not just defeat you. I will bankrupt you. I will dismantle your lives piece by piece, just like you dismantled my trust. I turned to Bella and smiled. It was the best performance of my life. You are right, I said. I was overreacting. Let us get you settled in. Bella beamed. She thought she had found a safe harbor. She did not realize she had just docked her ship in the middle of a minefield. The invasion of my sanctuary was completed 2 days later. At 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning, I was in the kitchen, brewing coffee, when the buzzer for the building's front gate rang. I did not need to check the camera to know who it was. The dread that pooled in my stomach was a familiar biological signal, one I had lived with for 18 years. It was the specific nausea that only my parents could induce. They did not come up quietly. My father, Robert Sterling, was a man who believed that volume was a substitute for authority. I could hear his voice echoing in the hallway before the elevator doors even opened. He was complaining about the lack of guest parking, about the complexity of the digital entry system, about the humidity of the Seattle air. When I opened the door, the visual impact of them hit me like a physical blow. My mother, Linda, was wearing a floral dress that was too bright for the gray morning. Her hair sprayed into a helmet of golden lacquer. My father wore his signature polo shirt, stretched tight over a stomach built on cheap beer and denial. Margaret, my mother cried out. She lunged at me. It was not a hug. It was a capture. She wrapped her arms around me, burying her face in my neck. The smell of her perfume, a cloying, powdery gardenia scent, filled my nose and made me want to gag. It was the smell of every lie she had ever told me. We were so worried. She whispered into my ear, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. You sounded so manic on the phone. I stood stiffly in her embrace, my arms pinned to my sides. I looked over her shoulder at my father. He did not hug me. He walked past us, carrying a large styrofoam cooler. He surveyed the apartment with a critical eye, looking for flaws, looking for leverage. Where is Bella? He asked. Sleeping, I said, extricating myself from my mother's grip. It is 10 in the morning. My father set the cooler down on my Italian marble countertop with a heavy thud. He opened the lid. We brought lasagna. He announced, Your mother made it. We know you do not cook. You are probably starving yourself again. You look skeletal. Margaret, it is concerning. I am a size 4. Dad, I am healthy. You look gaunt. My mother corrected, touching my cheek with a cold hand, like you are running on fumes. Just like sophomore year, the reference hung in the air. A poisonous vapor. They made themselves at home with terrifying speed. My father took the head of the dining table, the seat I usually sat in. My mother bustled around the kitchen, rearranging things she did not understand, moving my espresso machine to make room for her purse. Bella emerged from the bedroom 10 minutes later. She was wearing silk pajamas, my silk pajamas. When she saw our parents, she let out a squeal of delight that sounded entirely rehearsed. She ran to them, and for a moment, they formed a tableau of the perfect family, the doting parents and the cherished child. I stood by the window, the outsider in my own home. We need to talk, my father said, clapping his hands together. A family meeting. Sit down. Margaret. I sat at the far end of the table. My mother clasped her hands in front of her. She looked at me with eyes that were wide and wet with performative tears. We are here because we love you, she began, and because we are frightened for you. For me? I asked. My voice was calm, but my pulse was hammering a frantic rhythm against my wrist. I am not the one who stole an education fund, I am not the one with $24,000 in debt. Stop it. My father slammed his hand on the table. The silverware rattled. That is exactly what we are talking about. This obsession, this delusion. It is not a delusion. Dad, I saw the bank statements. You saw what your illness wanted you to see. My mother said softly. I stared at her. The gaslighting was so audacious, it was almost impressive. Margaret, honey, she continued, her voice dripping with poisonous honey. We spoke to Dr. Aris yesterday. You remember Dr. Aris? From the club? I remembered him. He was a psychiatrist who played golf with my father. He had lost his medical license in 2 states for overprescribing opioids, but he had managed to keep it here. He was a man who signed whatever piece of paper was put in front of him if the price was right. We told him about your Sayuting Harleen. 2 hash is greater than behavior, my mother said. The paranoia about money, the aggression toward your sister, the hoarding of resources. He agrees with us. It sounds like a relapse. He thinks you might be having a break from reality. I felt the blood drain from my face. This was their play. They were not just denying the theft. They were pathologizing my reaction to it. If I was crazy, then my accusations were just symptoms. If I was crazy, they were not thieves. They were martyrs, caring for a sick daughter. I am not having a relapse, I said, gripping the edge of the table. I am a senior financial analyst. I manage millions of dollars in assets. If I were mentally unstable, I would be fired. High-functioning psychosis is very real, my father said, nodding sagely, as if he were quoting a medical journal. You are good at hiding it, Margaret, but we see the cracks. You are hostile. You are vindictive. You threatened to call the police on your own sister. That is not the behavior of a sane person. That is a manic episode. We want you to start seeing Dr. Aris, my mother said. Twice a week, he can adjust your medication. He can help you let go of this. Sayuting Haoling. 2 hash is greater than this fixation on money. And if I refuse? I asked. My father leaned forward. His face was hard, his eyes flat and devoid of warmth. Then we will have to take steps to protect you from yourself. We have already looked into the paperwork for an emergency conservatorship. If you are a danger to yourself or others, and threatening to ruin your sister's life is a danger, we can petition the court to give us temporary control over your affairs. Just until you are well again. The room went silent. The hum of the refrigerator seemed deafening. A conservatorship. They wanted to take my life. They wanted to seize my bank accounts, my apartment, my career, and put it all under their control. They wanted to do to me what they had done to the trust fund. Drain me dry and leave me as a husk. I looked at Bella. She was looking down at her fingernails, hiding a smile. She knew this was the plan. If they controlled me, the gravy train would never stop. I realized then that arguing was useless. Logic was useless. You cannot reason with a predator who is hungry. You can only play dead. I took a deep breath. I let my shoulders slump. I let my face crumble. Sayuting Haoling. 2 hash is greater than I do not want to go to court. I whispered. My voice trembled. It was not entirely acting. The terror was real. We do not want that either. Baby, my mother cooed. She reached across the table and patted my hand. Her skin was dry and cold. We just want you to be happy. We want you to share. We want us to be a family again. I lowered my head. I needed them to believe I was broken. I needed them to believe they had won, so they would get careless. Okay, I said softly, "I will see Dr. Eris. Good girl," my father said, leaning back in his chair, satisfied. The tension in the room broke. They had subdued the beast. "I am just so tired," I said, rubbing my temples. "I think Saoyud Singh Haoling. 2 is greater than I think I need to take my medicine. Do you have it?" My mother asked solicitously. "It is on the coffee table," I said. I stood up and walked to the living room. They watched me. I picked up the orange bottle. I shook a pill into my hand. I put it in my mouth and took a sip of water. I swallowed, or at least, I pretended to. I tucked the pill under my tongue, a trick I had learned years ago when my mother tried to force feed me herbal supplements that made me sick. I sat down on the sofa, curling my legs under me. "I just need to rest for a minute," I said. "My head is spinning. Take your time." My father said. He stood up and walked to the fridge. He opened a beer. My beer. Imported craft lager. He cracked it open. "So," he said to Bella, "tell me about this job interview you have lined up. Is it near the mall?" While they talked, while they laughed and planned how to spend the money they thought they had secured, I slid my hand slowly, imperceptibly, between the cushions of the sofa. My phone was there. I had placed it there before I opened the door. I felt the smooth glass of the screen. I pressed the side button to wake it up silently. The recording application was open. The timer was running. 45 minutes. It had captured everything. The threat of the conservatorship, the admission that they had spoken to Dr. Aris to falsify a diagnosis, the blackmail. My mother walked over and sat next to me. She stroked my hair. It made my skin crawl, but I did not flinch. "You made the right choice, Margaret," she whispered. "We are going to take such good care of you. We will handle the bills. We will handle the stress. You just rest." I closed my eyes. "Thank you." "Mother," I said, inside the darkness of my mind. The fear was evaporating. It was being replaced by something sharper, something colder. It was the clarity of a surgeon picking up a scalpel. They wanted to play the role of the concerned parents. Fine. I would play the role of the unstable daughter. I would be exactly what they said I was, but they had made a fatal error. They thought they were locking me in a cage with them. They did not realize they were locking themselves in a cage with me. I listened to my father burp. I listened to Bella laugh. Keep laughing. I thought, enjoy the lasagna. Enjoy the beer, because this is the last meal you will ever eat in peace. I kept my hand on the phone, feeling the warmth of the battery. It was the only weapon I had, and for now, it was enough. Compliance is a weapon, if you know how to wield it. For the next 48 hours, I became the daughter they wanted. I was docile. I was medicated, or so they thought. I nodded when my father lectured me on fiscal responsibility while drinking my $60 scotch. I smiled when my mother reorganized my pantry, placing the organic quinoa behind the boxes of sugary toaster pastries she had bought for Bella. But beneath the surface, I was laying the groundwork for an education. Bella wanted a job. I would give her a job, but I would not give her a career. I would give her a mirror. I called Elena, an old associate from my university days. Elena now ran one of the most ruthless event planning agencies in Seattle. She was a woman who fired people for having lint on their blazers. She was perfect. "I have a favor to ask," I told Elena over the phone, speaking in low tones from my car. "My sister needs work. She thinks she is ready for the high-end circuit. I want you to hire her for the tech gala on Friday." Elena laughed, the sound sharp as breaking glass. "Is she good?" "Meg?" Or is this charity? She is pretty, I said, and she is entitled. She needs to learn that a pretty face does not carry a tray of champagne. Treat her like you would treat anyone else. Do not protect her. I understand. Elena said, it will be a trial by fire. I went home and delivered the news. Bella was ecstatic. She saw Tech Gala and imagined rich bachelors and red carpets. She did not imagine 12 hours of standing in heels, carrying heavy trays, and being invisible to the people she desperately wanted to impress. Friday night came. Bella left the apartment looking like she was attending the Oscars. Wearing another one of my dresses she had altered with safety pins. She came back 4 hours early. I was sitting in the living room with my parents. My father was asleep in my recliner, snoring loudly. My mother was flipping through a magazine. The door slammed open. Bella stormed in, her mascara running down her cheeks in black rivers. She was missing a shoe. She threw her purse across the room. It knocked over a vase of white lilies. The water spilled across the hardwood floor, dark and spreading. Those people are animals, she screamed. My parents jumped up. My mother rushed to her, cooing like a pigeon. What happened? Baby? Did someone hurt you? They fired me, Bella wailed. She collapsed onto the sofa. That witch Elena fired me in front of everyone, just because I sat down for 5 minutes to check my texts. And I may have, 小雨景好灵, too, spilled a drink. On who? I asked calmly from my chair. Some old guy. Who cares? It was just water. But Elena screamed at me. She called me incompetent. She said I was a liability. Bella turned her venomous gaze toward me. You set me up. Meg, you knew she was a psycho. You wanted me to fail. I did not want you to fail. I said, taking a sip of tea, I wanted you to work. There is a difference. You are jealous. Bella shrieked. She stood up and pointed a trembling finger at me. You are jealous because I am beautiful and you are just a corporate drone. You wanted to humiliate me. My father stepped between us. His face was purple with rage. He looked at Bella's tears, and then he looked at me. I saw the decision happen in his eyes. I saw the moment he decided that I was no longer an asset to be managed, but a threat to be neutralized. Sit down, Margaret, he growled. I remained standing. No, I said, sit down. He roared. The volume did not scare me anymore. It just bored me. We are done with this game, my father said. He walked to his briefcase, which was sitting by the door. He pulled out a blue folder. He tossed it onto the coffee table. It landed on top of the wet magazine my mother had dropped. We sold the house in Spokane, he said. I blinked. What? We sold it. We signed the papers this morning. The debt was too high. The creditors were going to take it anyway. So we sold it to a flipper for cash. He looked at me with a terrifying sense of ownership. We are moving in here. Margaret, permanently. Me, your mother, and Bella. We are a family. And families live together. I looked around my apartment, my sanctuary. The walls seemed to shrink. This is a 1-bedroom apartment. I said, we will make it work. My mother interjected, her voice shrill. Bella can take the bedroom. We will take the living room. You can sleep in the office. It has a door. It is cozy. You want me to sleep in my own office? In my own apartment? It is not just about sleeping arrangements, my father said. He tapped the blue folder. These are papers for a quitclaim deed. I looked at the folder. A quitclaim deed, a legal document used to transfer ownership of property. You are going to sign the apartment over to us, he said. I felt a laugh bubble up in my throat. It was a hysterical, jagged thing. You want me to give you my house? We are doing this for your protection, he said, repeating the lie until he believed it. With your mental state declining, Sao Yu Tsing howling, 2 is greater than look at what you did to your sister tonight. Sabotage, cruelty. You are not fit to manage an asset of this value. If you sign it over to us, we can protect it. We will let you live here. Of course, we will take care of you. But the title needs to be in a responsible name. And that name is yours? I asked. The man who lost a college fund to a pyramid scheme? His hand moved so fast I did not see it coming. The slap echoed in the room. It was a hard, stinging blow across my left cheek. My head snapped to the side. My ear rang with a high-pitched whine. I touched my cheek. The skin felt hot. For a moment, there was absolute silence. My mother gasped, covering her mouth, but her eyes were not shocked. They were watchful. Bella stopped crying and looked at me with a mixture of fear and excitement. My father stood there, breathing heavy, his hand still raised. You will respect me, he spat. You will sign those papers tomorrow. Or we will have Dr. Eris commit you to the state facility by Monday morning. Do not test me, Margaret. I am your father. I own you. I slowly turned my head back to face him. I did not cry. I did not scream. I felt something inside me click into place. It was the sound of a lock engaging. The last vestiges of the daughter who wanted to be loved died in that silence. The Meg who wanted approval was gone. The woman who remained was cold. She was a mathematician of revenge. I looked at my father. I looked at the red handprint fading on his palm, the handprint that matched the sting on my face. Get out, I said. My father laughed. It was an incredulous bark. You do not give the orders here. I am not giving an order, I said softly. I am giving a warning. I walked to the door and opened it. You have 5 minutes to pack your things, I said. If you are not out of my apartment in 5 minutes, I call the police, and I will not be calling them for a noise complaint. I will be pressing charges for assault. Assault? He scoffed. I was disciplining a hysterical child. I pointed to the corner of the ceiling, just above the entryway coat rack. A small, black dome sat there, blinking with a tiny red light. I installed internal security cameras 3 days ago. I lied. I did not have cameras, but they did not know that. They knew I worked in tech and finance. They knew I was paranoid. The color drained from my father's face. He looked at the blinking light of the smoke detector, which he mistook for a camera lens, and then back at me. You have it on tape? He whispered. Video and audio, I said. Cloud storage. Instant upload. My mother let out a small whimper. You would send your father to jail? She asked. He just hit me. Mother, in the state of Washington, domestic assault is a mandatory arrest. He will spend the weekend in a holding cell, and with his heart condition, Sao Yu Tsing howling, 2 is greater than well. The stress might be fatal. I looked at my watch. 4 minutes remaining. I saw the fear take hold. It was a beautiful thing. It stripped away the arrogance. It stripped away the entitlement. They were not powerful patriarchs or matriarchs. They were grifters who had been caught. Grab the bags. My father hissed to my mother. But where will we go? Bella cried. We sold the house. We have nowhere to go. There is a Motel 6 on the highway, I said coldly. They have vacancies. I checked. They scrambled. It was pathetic and satisfying. They threw clothes into suitcases. Bella grabbed her shoes. My mother tried to take the silverware, but I caught her eye. and she dropped the fork back onto the table. They moved with the frantic energy of rats fleeing a sinking ship. When they reached the door, dragging their luggage, my father turned back to me. His eyes were full of hate. "You are dead to us," he said. "You are a monster." I touched my cheek again. It was throbbing, but the pain felt distant, like it belonged to someone else. "A monster," I repeated, testing the word on my tongue. I smiled. It was not a nice smile. "Maybe," I said, "but this monster owns the house, and you are trespassing." I slammed the door in their faces. I heard the lock click. I heard them shouting in the hallway, blaming each other, their voices fading as they retreated to the elevator. I leaned my back against the door and slid down to the floor. The apartment was quiet again. The vase was still broken. The water was still spreading on the floor. I was alone. I had no parents. I had no sister. I had no safety net. But for the first time in my life, I could breathe. I looked at the blue folder they had left on the coffee table. The quitclaim deed. I crawled over to it. I opened it. Inside, paper clipped to the back, was a printout of a bank balance I recognized. It was my retirement account. They had found the statements in my office. They knew exactly how much I was worth. They had not just come for the apartment. They had come for everything. I picked up my phone. I dialed a number I had saved but never used. "Hello?" A deep voice answered. "Mr. Davis," I said, "this is Margaret Sterling. I need a lawyer, and I need a restraining order." Tonight, the war had begun, and I was done playing defense. The collapse of my life did not happen with a scream. It happened with a silent, digital vibration in the pocket of my blazer. It was Monday morning. I was sitting in the glass-walled conference room of my firm, surrounded by men in gray suits who spoke about market volatility and yield curves. Outside, the Seattle rain was relentless, washing the city in a palette of slate and charcoal. I was trying to focus on the projection screen, trying to forget the red handprint on my father's face, trying to forget the silence of my empty apartment. My phone buzzed. Then it buzzed again, and again, a rapid-fire staccato against my hip. I glanced down, shielding the screen with my hand. It was not a text message. It was a security alert from my credit monitoring service. Alert. New inquiry. Wells Fargo. Personal loan. Alert. New inquiry. Nordstrom. Credit card application. Alert. New inquiry. Fast cash payday lenders online. The blood drained from my head so quickly I felt dizzy. I unlocked the phone. The notifications were scrolling down the screen like a waterfall of disaster. Within the span of 2 hours, someone had applied for 7 different lines of credit using my social security number. Then came the score update. My credit score, the golden number I had polished and protected like a diamond, had plummeted. It had dropped from 820 to 540. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the floor. Every head in the conference room turned toward me. "Miss Sterling?" the managing director asked. His brow furrowed. Saoyutsing Haoling. 2# is greater than I have an emergency. I stammered. I ran to my office. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type. I logged into the credit bureau's website. The details were there, stark and undeniable. The applications had been made online, but the address listed for the new cards was the Motel 6 on the highway, the very place I had banished my family to. Saoyutsing Haoling. 2 cancelletto è maggiore di Bella. She had found my tax returns in the home office during her invasion. She had my social security number. She had my date of birth. And now, out of spite, out of a vindictive need to burn the kingdom she could not rule. She was destroying my financial identity. But the tragedy was not just the money. In my world, credit is character. 10 minutes later, the internal phone on my desk rang. It was Human Resources. Margaret, can you come down to the compliance office? Please bring your badge. The walk to the elevator felt like a funeral march. Compliance was where careers went to die. I sat across from the compliance officer, a woman named Janet, who I had shared lunch with just last week. She would not look me in the eye. We received a flag from our automated risk system, Janet said, sliding a piece of paper across the desk. It shows multiple high-risk credit inquiries and a massive drop in your solvency rating. You know, company policy. Margaret, analysts with significant financial distress are considered high risk for insider trading and bribery. It is identity theft, I said, my voice rising. My sister, Xiao Jinghao Ling, 2# is greater than she stole my information. Janet Sihu. She looked at me with pity, which was worse than suspicion. We have also received 3 phone calls this morning from a Mrs. Sterling. She claims you are undergoing a mental health crisis and have been cutting off family support violently. She asked if our insurance covers inpatient psychiatric care. My mother, she was attacking on 2 fronts. Bella was destroying the finances. My mother was destroying the reputation. I am not crazy. Janet, they are criminals. I believe that you believe that, Janet said softly. But until this investigation is resolved, we have to place you on unpaid administrative leave. Please hand over your badge and your laptop. I walked out of the building into the rain. I had no umbrella. The water soaked my silk blouse, plastering it to my skin. I stood on the sidewalk, watching the revolving doors spin, shutting me out of the life I had built. I was 24 years old. I was homeless in my career. I was financially ruined. I got into my car. I did not go home. I drove toward the Motel 6. My vision was blurred by rain and rage. I was going to kill her. The thought was not metaphorical. I wanted to wrap my hands around Bella's neck and squeeze until the entitlement drained out of her eyes. But before I reached the highway, my phone rang again. This time, the caller identification was a number I did not recognize. Miss Sterling? A female voice asked. This is Nurse Ratched from Harborview Medical Center. My heart stopped. Yes, we have your sister, Bella Sterling, in the emergency room. She was brought in by ambulance 20 minutes ago. An overdose. The world tilted on its axis. Is she Xiao Jinghao Ling? 2# is greater than is she alive? I whispered. The rage evaporated, replaced by a cold, heavy stone of dread. Despite everything, the biological imperative to protect my kin flared up. She is stable, the nurse said. They pumped her stomach, but she is asking for you. Or, rather, your parents are screaming for you. I turned the car around. I drove to the hospital like a madwoman, running 2 red lights. When I arrived at the emergency room, the scene was chaos. I pushed through the double doors. The smell of antiseptic and stale coffee assaulted me. I heard my mother before I saw her. She did this. My mother was shrieking, pointing a finger at a bewildered doctor. Her sister drove her to this. She cut her off. She threw her out on the street like a dog. My baby wanted to die because she felt so unloved. I froze in the hallway. They were in a curtained partition. The curtain was half open. Bella was lying on the gurney, hooked up to a saline drip. She looked pale, fragile, angelic. But then I saw it. My mother turned to grab a tissue, and for a split second, Bella's eyes opened. She looked around the room. She saw me standing in the shadows. She did not look suicidal. She looked bored. She picked at her fingernail. Then, seeing me, she quickly shut her eyes and let out a low, piteous moan. Mommy, Sao Yuzing Haoling. 2 hash is greater than it hurts. Sao Yuzing Haoling. R. Jinghao Dayu. My mother threw herself onto the bed. Oh, God, she is in pain. Where is the doctor? It was a performance, a grotesque, Shakespearean tragedy staged for an audience of nurses and police officers. I walked into the light. You are lying, I said. My voice was hoarse. The room went silent. My parents turned. My father's face twisted into a mask of righteous fury. You, he roared. You have the nerve to show your face here. Look at her. Look at what you did. I walked toward the bed. I pointed at Bella. She stole my social security number. I said to the doctor, who was looking at me with undisguised disgust. She opened 7 credit accounts this morning. She knew I would find out. She knew I was coming for her. This, Sao Yuzing Haoling. 2 hash is greater than this is not a suicide attempt. This is a distraction. What did she take? Tylenol. Benadryl? The doctor stepped in front of me, blocking my path. Miss Sterling, your sister ingested a non-lethal amount of sleeping aids, but the intent was self-harm. She is in a fragile state. Accusing her of crimes right now is incredibly inappropriate. Inappropriate? I laughed. It was a jagged sound that scraped my throat. She cost me my job today. She ruined my credit. She is a criminal, not a victim. Get her out of here. My mother screamed. She is trying to finish the job. She wants Bella dead. A security guard stepped forward. He was a large man with a tired face. Ma'am, you need to lower your voice or leave, he said to me. I looked around the room. Everyone, the nurses, the patients in the waiting area, the police officer taking notes. They all looked at me with hatred. They saw a cold, well-dressed woman attacking a grieving family. They saw the monster my parents had painted. They did not see the truth. They did not see the text message on my mother's phone that lit up on the bedside table. I was close enough to read the preview. From Dad. Do not worry. The narrative is set. Meg looks like the villain. Lawyer says we can sue for emotional distress. Sao Yuzing Haoling. 2 hash is greater than I snapped. The pressure of the last week. The theft. The gaslighting. The loss of my career. The betrayal. Finally breached the dam. I grabbed my mother's phone from the table. Hey, give that back, my father shouted. I held it up. Look, read the text. They are planning this. The security guard grabbed my arm. Ma'am, let go of the phone. No, you have to see, I shouted, struggling against his grip. I tried to unlock it, but my father lunged at me. He grabbed my wrist. In the struggle, the phone flew out of my hand. It hit the hard linoleum floor with a sickening crunch. The screen shattered. There was a moment of absolute silence. My mother wailed. She attacked me. She just attacked us. The security guard twisted my arm behind my back. Pain shot up my shoulder. Okay, that is enough, he grunted. You are coming with me. I looked at Bella. She was watching through half-open eyes. The corner of her mouth twitched upward, just a fraction of an inch. A smile. She had won. She had successfully framed me as the aggressor. Let me go, I screamed. Losing all composure, I kicked at the guard. I was hysterical. I was exactly what they said I was. You are protecting the wrong people. They are parasites. The doctor shook his head sadly. Call psych services. He said to a nurse, "We need a consult. This looks like a manic episode with violent tendencies." I was dragged out of the emergency room. My heels scraped against the floor. People stared. Someone was filming with their phone. I was thrown out onto the wet pavement of the hospital parking lot. The guard pointed a finger at me. "If you come back onto this property tonight, you will be arrested for trespassing and disorderly conduct. Go home." I stood in the rain. My blazer was torn at the shoulder. My hair was plastered to my skull. I had no job. I had no family. And now, I had a medical record that noted violent behavior. I walked to my car, shaking uncontrollably. I sat in the driver's seat and screamed until my throat tasted like blood. They had taken everything. They had stripped me down to the bone. But as I sat there, shivering, watching the red lights of the ambulance bay reflect in the puddles, a thought crystallized in my mind. It was cold and hard and sharp. They thought they had destroyed me. They thought that by stripping away my career and my reputation, they had left me with nothing. But they were wrong. When you have nothing left to lose, you have no fear left to hold you back. I wiped the rain from my face. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. The eyes staring back were not the eyes of a victim. They were the eyes of a survivor who had just realized that the rules of civilized society no longer applied to her. I reached into my glove compartment. I pulled out a business card I had been saving. It was thick, cream-colored cardstock. Arthur Davis, attorney at law. I did not care if it was midnight. I dialed the number. "Hello?" A groggy voice answered. "Mr. Davis," I said. My voice was steady now, terrifyingly steady. "I want to invoke the grandmother clause. I want the house. I want the trust. And I want to send my sister to prison." There was a pause on the line. Then, the sound of a lamp clicking on. "Come to my office at 8 o'clock in the morning. Miss Sterling, bring everything." I hung up the phone. The tragedy was over. The war was about to enter its final, bloody phase. The office of Arthur Davis smelled of mahogany, lemon polish, and old money. It was a scent that intimidated most people, designed to make them feel small and apologetic. But to me, it smelled like oxygen. It was 8 o'clock in the morning. The city of Seattle was still waking up, shaking off the gray drizzle of the night. But inside the sanctuary on the 42nd floor, the air was still and warm. I sat in a burgundy leather wingback chair. My clothes were dry now, but they were the same ruined garments I had worn yesterday. My blazer was torn at the shoulder seam. My silk blouse was stained with rain and sweat. I had not slept. My eyes felt like they were filled with sand, but my mind possessed a terrifying clarity. It was the hyper-awareness of a soldier in a trench who knows the shelling is about to stop and the charge is about to begin. Arthur Davis sat across from me behind a desk that looked like it had been carved from the hull of a galleon. He was 70 years old, with skin like parchment and eyes that were sharp, blue, and utterly devoid of patience for foolishness. He had been my grandmother's attorney for 40 years. He was the only man my father feared. He placed a file on the desk. It was thick, bound in blue legal paper, and sealed with a red wax stamp that had been broken. "You look like hell, Margaret," he said. His voice was gravelly, a low rumble that vibrated in the quiet room. "I feel like hell, Arthur, but I am ready to burn it down." He nodded slowly. He did not offer me tea or sympathy. He knew me too well for that. He tapped the file with a manicured finger. "Do you know why your grandmother hired me?" he asked. "Because you are the best shark in the city." I said, "Because she knew her son was a parasite He corrected. She used that word, parasite. She loved him because a mother cannot help but love her child, but she did not like him, and she certainly did not trust him. She watched him drain your grandfather's pension. She watched him manipulate your emotions, and she saw him start to do the same to Bella. I looked at the file. My grandmother had died 3 years ago. I thought she had left everything to my father, who had promptly squandered it. She left him the house in Spokane and a modest stipend. Arthur said. She knew he would blow through it in 5 years. She was generous. She gave him 5. He managed it in 3. But the bulk of her estate, the real wealth, she hid it. He opened the file, the Margaret Sterling Preservation Trust. He read, it includes the deed to the Victorian estate on Queen Anne Hill, a portfolio of blue chip stocks, and a cash reserve. Total valuation is currently $4.5 million. The number hung in the air. $4 million. My parents had destroyed my life over a $20,000 debt, while this fortune sat silently in a vault, waiting. Why? I whispered. Why did she hide it? Because she knew that if your parents knew about it while you were a minor, they would have found a way to bleed it dry. Arthur explained. They would have used you as a conduit. So, she placed it in a blind trust. He turned the page, but there is a condition. Margaret, a strict, non-negotiable clause. Your grandmother called it the severance clause. Read it. I said. Arthur adjusted his reading glasses. To inherit the preservation trust, the beneficiary, Margaret Sterling, must reach the age of 25. Furthermore, upon her 25th birthday, the trustee must certify that the beneficiary has maintained total financial independence from Robert and Linda Sterling for a period of at least 12 months prior, or, in the event of coercion, has taken decisive legal action to sever all ties. If the beneficiary is found to be supporting, housing, or enabling the debts of Robert and Linda Sterling, or if she is under their legal guardianship, the trust will be dissolved and the assets donated to the Seattle Humane Society. I stared at the words. My grandmother had played a long game from the grave. She had built a fortress for me, but she had locked the gate until I proved I was strong enough to defend it. My birthday is in 3 days. I said, Thursday. Exactly. Arthur said, and your parents know this. They received a notification from the trust administrator 6 months ago stating that the evaluation period was beginning. They know about the money. Margaret, they have known for 6 months. The realization hit me like a physical blow to the chest. The timing, the sudden phone calls, Bella's expulsion, the invasion of my apartment, the manufactured crisis, the accusations of mental illness. They were not just looking for a place to stay. They were trying to sabotage the clause. If they moved in with me, I would be housing them. I would lose the inheritance. If I paid Bella's debt, I would be enabling them. I would lose the inheritance and the conservatorship, the emergency guardianship they were threatening. If they become my legal guardians, I said, my voice trembling with rage, then I am technically under their control. The trust dissolves, or worse, as my guardians, they could argue they have the right to access the funds for my care. Precisely, Arthur said, they are trying to force a failure of the condition, or they are trying to seize control of the beneficiary. They do not care which. As long as they get access to the capital, they are evil. I whispered. It was not a hyperbolic statement. It was a factual observation. They are desperate, Arthur said, which makes them dangerous. but it also makes them stupid. He pressed a button on his intercom. Send them in, he said. I looked at the heavy oak doors. You invited them? I told them you were ready to surrender, Arthur said, a thin, wolfish smile touching his lips. I told them you were ready to sign the power of attorney papers to avoid hospitalization. They think they are coming here to claim their prize. The doors opened. They walked in like royalty, reclaiming a usurped throne. My father led the way, wearing a suit that was too tight around the waist. My mother followed, dressed in black as if she were in mourning for my sanity. And behind them, Bella. She was not in a hospital gown. She was wearing jeans and a hoodie, looking surprisingly healthy for someone who had allegedly tried to end her life 12 hours ago. The suicide attempt had been a strategic pivot, discarded as soon as a better option appeared. They stopped when they saw me. They saw the torn blazer. They saw the dark circles under my eyes. They smiled. Margaret, my mother said, her voice dripping with that sickening, weaponized pity. Oh, look at you. You look broken. Thank God Mr. Davis called us. We can end this nightmare right now. Sit down, Arthur commanded. He did not stand up. They sat in the 3 chairs arranged opposite his desk. I sat to the side, isolated, like the defendant in a murder trial. We have the papers ready, my father said, pulling a sheaf of documents from his briefcase. Medical power of attorney, financial power of attorney. We even have a letter from Dr. Aris recommending immediate custodial care at home. We are willing to forego the inpatient facility if Margaret cooperates. We are very generous. Arthur picked up the papers. He did not look at them. He dropped them into the wastebasket beside his desk. My father's face went red. What are you doing? Those are legal documents. Those are trash. Robert, Arthur said calmly, we are not here to discuss your guardianship of Margaret. We are here to discuss your eviction from her life. My mother laughed nervously. Arthur, please. Margaret is unwell. She attacked us at the hospital. She is delusional. She needs us. She needs you like a swimmer needs an anchor, Arthur said. He opened a drawer and pulled out a new stack of papers. This, he said, sliding the documents across the mahogany surface, is a restraining order against Robert, Linda, and Bella Sterling. It was signed by a judge at midnight. If you come within 500 feet of Margaret, her home, or her place of employment, you will be arrested. My father stood up. You cannot do this. She is my daughter. Sit down. Arthur's voice cracked like a whip. My father sat, and this, Arthur continued, sliding a second stack, is a civil lawsuit for the theft of $75,000 from the Sterling Family Educational Trust. We have the bank records. Robert, we have the wire transfers to that pyramid scheme. We have the receipts for the Range Rover. That is fraud. That is embezzlement. And since the trust was technically a separate legal entity, that is a federal crime. My mother went pale. Her hand flew to her throat. And finally, Arthur said, pointing a finger at Bella, who had shrunk back into her chair, we have the police report filed this morning regarding the identity theft committed by Bella Sterling. 7 counts of fraudulent credit application, grand larceny, since she used the internet to do it. It is wire fraud. That carries a mandatory minimum sentence in federal prison. Bella made a small, choking sound. She looked at our parents. Daddy, you said, Sao Yu Tsing Hao Ling. 2 hash is greater than you said it would be okay. You said Meg was crazy. Arthur leaned forward. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Margaret is not crazy. he said softly. Margaret is the only one in this room who is not going to prison. Unless Sayu Jinghao Ling, Art Jinghao Tayu. My father looked up. His eyes were desperate. Feral. Unless what? Unless you disappear, Arthur said. He pulled out the final document. It was a single page. This is a confession, Arthur explained. It states that you knowingly defrauded the educational trust. It states that Bella stole the identity of her sister. And it states that you, Robert and Linda, coerced Bella into doing it. I will never sign that, my father shouted. I will not go to jail. You will not go to jail if you sign it. Arthur said, Margaret is willing to drop the criminal charges and hold the lawsuit in abeyance. In exchange, you will sign a waiver acknowledging that you have absolutely no claim to her finances, her property, or her future estate. You will acknowledge that she is fully independent, and you will leave Seattle today. And if we do not, my mother whispered. Then Margaret presses the button. Arthur said, the police are waiting in the lobby. The Federal Bureau of Investigation has already been forwarded the file on the trust fund. You will be arrested before you reach the elevator. My father looked at me. For the first time, he did not look at me with contempt or ownership. He looked at me with fear. He saw the stranger sitting in the wingback chair. He saw the coldness in my eyes. Meg, he pleaded, baby, you would not do this. We are family. I stood up. My legs were steady. I walked over to the desk. I looked down at them. I am not your family, I said. My voice was quiet. Dad, I am your retirement plan. I am your automatic teller machine. I am your scapegoat. But I am done. I picked up the confession. I slid it toward him. Sign it, I said, or I walk out that door and tell the officers in the lobby that you are here. My mother began to cry. Real tears this time. Tears of a con artist who realizes the mark has a gun. Bella, tell her you are sorry. My mother sobbed. Bella looked at me. Her lip trembled. Meg, please. I am 18. I cannot go to jail. I am too pretty for jail. The absurdity of the statement almost made me laugh. Then sign the confession. Bella, I said, admit you stole it. Admit they told you to do it. Bella grabbed the pen. She did not hesitate. She did not look at our father. She signed her name with a shaking hand, throwing her parents under the bus to save her own skin. It was the most honest thing she had ever done. My father stared at her betrayal. Then he looked at the open file on Arthur's desk. He saw the words $4.5 million upside down on the summary page. He realized then what he had lost. He realized that if he had just been a decent father, if he had just loved me, he might have shared in that wealth. Greed had blinded him, and now greed was strangling him. He picked up the pen. His hand shook. He signed. My mother signed last. Weeping silently, Arthur took the papers. He checked the signatures. He stamped them. Done, he said. He looked at my father. You have 1 hour to vacate the city limits. The restraining order is now in effect. If Margaret sees you, if she receives a text from you, if you so much as like a photo of hers on Facebook, the deal is void and the Federal Bureau of Investigation comes knocking. Do you understand? My father stood up. He looked old. He looked defeated. He looked at me one last time, searching for a trace of the daughter who used to bring him coffee in bed on Sundays. He found nothing but a reflection of his own cruelty. Come on, he muttered to my mother. They walked out. Bella followed them, clutching her hoodie, casting one terrified glance back at me. The heavy doors closed. The click of the latch was the loudest sound in the world. Silence returned to the office. The smell of mahogany and lemon. Arthur Davis closed the file. He looked at me. "Happy birthday, Margaret," he said softly. I looked at the closed door. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was not happiness. It was not joy. It was the feeling of a heavy weight being lifted, leaving behind a sore, raw emptiness. I walked to the window and looked down at the city. The rain had stopped. The clouds were breaking. A single shaft of pale sunlight pierced the gray, illuminating the wet streets below. I was 25 years old in 3 days. I was an orphan by choice. I was rich, and I was entirely, terrifyingly free. "Is it over?" I asked, my breath fogging the glass. "The legal war is over," Arthur said behind me. "But the cleanup? That is just beginning." I pressed my hand against the cold window. "Let it begin," I whispered. "The internet does not care about signed affidavits or notarized confessions. The internet cares about the 30-second video clip that makes you feel something visceral." And unfortunately for me, the video of my breakdown in the emergency room had everything the algorithm desired. A screaming woman in a torn blazer, a weeping mother, and a fragile, beautiful girl lying on a hospital bed. I sat in my car in the parking garage of my office building. It was Tuesday morning, 24 hours after the confrontation in Arthur Davis's office. I held my phone in my lap. The video had been posted by a bystander, captioned simply, "Rich corporate psycho attacks grieving family at Harborview." It had 300,000 views. I scrolled through the comments, my face illuminated by the blue light of the screen. "Look at her clothes. She is probably upset because her sister's hospital bill cut into her Gucci budget. I know her. She works at Sterling Investments. She fired my cousin once. She is ice cold. Someone should find out where she lives. People like this need to be taught a lesson." I turned off the phone. The screen went black, reflecting my own tired eyes. I had the truth in my briefcase. I had the confession signed by my father, admitting to fraud and embezzlement. I had the admission from Bella that she had staged the suicide attempt. I had the legal exoneration that Arthur had drafted. But as I stepped out of the car and walked toward the elevator, I realized that truth is a slow, heavy thing. A lie is light. It travels around the world while the truth is still putting on its boots. I swiped my badge at the security turnstile. It beeped red. Access denied. The security guard, a man named Frank, who I had greeted every morning for 4 years, did not look at me. He looked at a spot on the wall just above my left shoulder. "I have been instructed to escort you to Human Resources, Miss Sterling," he said. I followed him. The walk through the lobby was a gauntlet. The receptionist stopped typing. The junior analysts gathered by the espresso bar fell silent. I could feel their eyes on my back. They were not looking at a colleague. They were looking at a viral villain. They were dissecting my walk, my posture, searching for the madness the internet promised them. In the Human Resources office, Janet was waiting. She looked tired. On her desk was a tablet, paused on a frame of the video where my mouth was open in a scream and my hair was wild. I sat down and placed the blue folder on her desk. "I have proof," I said. My voice was calm, devoid of the emotion they expected. I opened the folder. I laid out the confession. I laid out the police report for Bella's identity theft. I laid out the statement from Arthur Davis. "My father signed this yesterday," I said. "He admits to stealing the trust fund. He admits to coercing Bella. The suicide attempt was a fabrication to avoid federal fraud charges. I am the victim here." Janet looked at the papers. She read them slowly. She touched the embossed seal of the notary. Then she looked up at me. Her expression was not one of relief. It was one of uncomfortable resignation. This is Xiaoying Haoling. 2# is greater than extensive, she said, and legally, it clears you of the fraud flags. So, I can go back to work. I said. It was not a question. Janet Sehil. She took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. Margaret, we operate in a trust-based industry. Our clients trust us with their life savings because we project stability. Prudence. She turned the tablet around so I could see the video again. This is not stability, she said. This is a public relations nightmare. We have had clients calling all morning. They do not care about your father's confession. They care that their portfolio manager looks like she is having a psychotic break on Facebook. I stared at the screen. That is not fair. Fair has nothing to do with finance. Margaret, you know that. She slid a thick envelope across the desk. We are placing you on indefinite paid administrative leave. 6 months. Full salary. We will frame it as a sabbatical for Xiaoying Haoling. 2# is greater than family health reasons. You are paying me to go away. I said, we are paying for the noise to die down. She corrected, if, in 6 months, the internet has forgotten, and it usually does, we can discuss your return. But right now, you are radioactive. Your presence in the building is a liability. I looked at the envelope. It was a golden parachute, but it felt like a body bag. I had done everything right. I had caught the thieves. I had secured the legal victory, but I had lost the war for my reputation. I stood up. I took the envelope. I expect my bonus to be included, I said. Janet blinked, surprised by my sudden coldness. Of course, prorated to today. I walked out. I did not say goodbye to Frank. I did not look at the analysts. I walked to the elevator, pressed the button for the garage, and descended into the earth. Driving home, the isolation settled in. It was not the quiet of solitude. It was the silence of a vacuum. My phone was silent because I had blocked every number except Arthur's. My career was paused. My family was gone. I pulled into the parking garage of my apartment building. As I walked to the lobby, Mrs. Higgins was waiting for the elevator with her poodle. She saw me and visibly recoiled. She pulled the dog closer, as if I might bite it. Good afternoon, Mrs. Higgins, I said. She did not answer. She pressed the button to close the elevator doors, trying to shut them before I could enter. I stuck my hand out, forcing the safety sensor to retract the doors. I stepped inside. The space was small. I heard about your poor sister, Mrs. Higgins whispered, staring at the floor numbers. Such a tragedy, to be driven to that. Xiaoying Haoling. 2# is greater than by one's own flesh and blood. She did not try to kill herself. Mrs. Higgins, I said, staring straight ahead. She stole my identity and committed wire fraud. Mrs. Higgins let out a sharp, derisive sniff. That is not what the community newsletter says. Your mother sent a very heartfelt email to the board. She explained how you have been struggling with Xiaoying Haoling. 2 dièse est supérieur à épisode. We are all praying for you. Margaret, praying you find help. I looked at her. I looked at this woman who had nothing better to do than gossip about lives she did not understand. My mother is a liar and a thief, I said, and if you mention my name in your newsletter again, I will sue the Homeowners Association for defamation. I have a very expensive lawyer, Mrs. Higgins, and I have nothing to do all day but litigate. The elevator dinged at her floor. She scrambled out, dragging the poodle, looking terrified. I rode the rest of the way up to the penthouse alone. When I entered my apartment, it was exactly as I had left it. Cold, white, empty. The stain from the spilled lily water was still on the floor. A dark ring on the hardwood. I walked to the kitchen. I poured a glass of water. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from a food delivery application. Your order has been delivered. I had not ordered food. I walked to the front door and opened it. Sitting on the doormat were 10 pizzas. I opened the top box. Someone had written on the inside of the lid, in pepperoni slices, "Soijinghaling, 2 monster." It was petty. It was childish. It was probably one of Bella's friends from her old sorority, or some internet vigilante who thought they were serving justice. I looked at the pizzas. I looked at the word, "Soijinghaling, 2 monster." My parents had called me that. The internet called me that. My neighbors called me that. I picked up a slice of pizza. It was cold. I took a bite. I stood in the doorway of my multi-million-dollar apartment, eating the pizza sent by my harassers. And as I chewed, I felt something shift inside me. I realized I did not care. For 24 years, I had tried to be good. I had tried to be the perfect daughter, the perfect student, the perfect employee. I had starved myself of emotion to fit their mold. And what had it gotten me? Betrayal, theft, public humiliation. Being good was a scam. It was a game rigged by people like my parents, who used guilt as a currency. If they wanted a monster, fine, I would be a monster. But I would be a monster who won. I kicked the rest of the pizza boxes aside. I went back inside and locked the deadbolt. I walked to my office. I sat down at my desk. I opened my laptop. I did not log into my work email. I logged into the account Arthur Davis had given me access to earlier that morning, the Margaret Sterling Preservation Trust. I looked at the balance, $4,500,000. I looked at the stock portfolio. It was conservative, too conservative. It was built for preservation, not growth. I cracked my knuckles. I had 6 months of paid leave. I had $4 million of capital, and I had a burning, cold desire to prove to the world that I did not need their approval to be powerful. I began to type. I began to rebalance the portfolio. I began to move assets. I was not just going to preserve this money. I was going to weaponize it. The public could think what they wanted. Let them gossip. Let them hate. While they were typing comments on Facebook, I was going to buy the platforms they stood on. I worked through the night. The blue light of the screens washed over me, baptizing me in the only religion that had never betrayed me. Compound interest. The King County Courthouse was a building designed to make human beings feel small. The ceilings were too high. The marble floors were too hard. And the air always smelled of floor wax and stale anxiety. I stood in the corridor outside courtroom 3B. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, a sound that drilled into the base of my skull. It had been 10 days since the incident at the hospital. 10 days of legal maneuvering, plea bargains, and silence. The heavy oak doors opened. Bella walked out first. She was not wearing handcuffs, but she looked shackled. Her shoulders were slumped forward, collapsing her chest as if she were trying to protect her heart from further injury. She wore a gray cardigan that was too big for her. Cheap polyester, not the cashmere she used to steal from my closet. She had taken the plea deal. Arthur Davis had orchestrated it with the precision of a maestro. In exchange for dropping the federal wire fraud charges, which carried a mandatory prison sentence, Bella had pleaded guilty to felony identity theft and grand larceny. The sentence was 5 years of probation, 500 hours of community service, and mandatory restitution of every cent she had spent. But the real sentence was the ink on the paper. She was 19 years old, and she was now a felon. In the United States, that is a brand that burns deeper than fire. It meant no student loans. It meant most corporate jobs were forever out of reach. It meant she would likely struggle to rent an apartment in her own name for the rest of her life. My parents followed her out. They looked like ghosts of the people who had stormed into my apartment 2 weeks ago. My father seemed to have shrunk 3 inches. His suit hung loosely on his frame, and his face was a map of broken capillaries and defeat. My mother was not crying. She had run out of tears, or perhaps she had simply run out of an audience who believed them. They stopped when they saw me leaning against the marble wall. Arthur stood beside me, a silent sentinel in a 3-piece suit. He held the final paperwork in his briefcase. "Margaret," my mother whispered. Her voice was cracked, dry as autumn leaves. I did not move. I did not offer a hug. I kept my hands in the pockets of my trench coat. "It is done," I said. My father looked at me with eyes that were red-rimmed and hollow. "Are you happy?" he asked. His voice was not angry anymore. It was just tired. "You destroyed her future. She is a felon. Margaret, she can never be a nurse. She can never be a teacher. You took her life away. I did not take her life," I said. "I held her accountable. There is a difference. You never taught her that difference. So the state of Washington had to do it for you." He flinched as if I had struck him. "We are selling the car," he said, looking at the floor, "and the furniture. We are moving into a 1-bedroom rental in Tacoma. It is all we can afford after the legal fees and the restitution payments." "Good," I said. The word hung in the air, cold and sharp. My mother took a step forward. Her hand reached out, hovering in the space between us. Trembling, "We have nothing left," she pleaded. "The lawyer took the savings. The house is gone. Bella is ruined. Please, Margaret, you have the trust fund. Millions. Just Sawidzing 2 hashes greater than help us get started. Just a small loan, for family's sake." I looked at her hand. I remembered how that hand used to brush my hair when I was 5. I remembered how that hand used to slap my wrist when I reached for a second cookie. I remembered how that hand had signed the papers to steal my college fund. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was not anger. It was not hate. It was a vast, echoing emptiness. It was the feeling of walking through a house that has burned down, where the ash is cold and the structure is gone, and there is nothing left to salvage. I looked her in the eye. "Blood is just biology." "Mother," I said softly, "it is just cells and DNA. Loyalty is family. Respect is family. You are not my family. You are just the people who share my genetic code, and you have cost me enough." I turned to Arthur. "Give them the envelope," I said. Arthur pulled a plain white envelope from his jacket pocket and handed it to my father. My father took it, his hands shaking. Hope flickered in his eyes. He thought it was a check. He thought I had broken. He tore it open. Inside was a single photograph. It was a picture of me, alone, standing on the balcony of my penthouse, holding a glass of champagne. On the back, in my handwriting, were 3 words: "Do not call." My father stared at the photo. His face crumbled. "Let us go," he muttered to my mother. They walked away down the long, sterile corridor. Bella did not look back. She walked with her head down, staring at her cheap shoes, dragging her feet like a prisoner marching to a cell. I watched them until they turned the corner and vanished. I stood there for a long time. The hallway was silent. The hum of the lights seemed to get louder. I won, I said to the empty air. Arthur looked at me. He placed a hand on my shoulder. It was a fatherly gesture, warm and firm, the kind of touch I had never received from the man who just walked away. You survived. Margaret, Arthur corrected. Winning implies there was a prize. There's no prize here, just wreckage and survival. I nodded. He was right. There was no confetti. There was no parade. There was just the cessation of pain, leaving behind a dull ache where my history used to be. I walked out of the courthouse into the Seattle rain. It was always raining. I drove back to my apartment. When I unlocked the door, the silence greeted me. It was absolute. There were no pizzas on the mat, no yelling, no television blaring reality shows. I walked into the guest bedroom, Bella's room. It was empty. I had hired a cleaning crew to remove every trace of her. The walls were scrubbed. The carpet was shampooed. The smell of her cheap vanilla body spray was gone, replaced by the scent of bleach and lemon. I sat on the edge of the bare mattress. I looked at my hands. They were steady. I was rich. I was free. I was safe. But as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the empty floor, I felt a single tear roll down my cheek. It was hot and salty. I wiped it away, angrily. I was not crying for them. I was crying for the little girl inside me who had waited 24 years for her parents to love her, only to realize that they never would. I was mourning a fantasy. I stood up and walked to the window. The city lights were turning on, a million little stars in the grid of the streets. I poured myself a glass of wine. I sat in my expensive leather chair. I am the monster, I whispered to the glass. And then, for the first time in my life, I took a sip of wine without my hand trembling. If being a monster meant being safe, then I would grow claws. I would grow scales, and I would never, ever let anyone into my cave again. The war was over. The silence was my victory, and it was deafening. 6 months is a long time in the world of finance, but it is a blink of an eye in the life of a family feud. I sat in the library of the Victorian estate on Queen Anne Hill. This was my grandmother's house, and now it was mine. It was a fortress of dark mahogany wainscoting, a velvet drapeche, and stained glass windows that turned the relentless Seattle rain into a kaleidoscope of muted colors on the Persian rugs. It was a stark contrast to the sterile, white penthouse I had abandoned. That apartment had been a stage for a modern tragedy. This house was a mausoleum for old secrets. The fire in the hearth crackled, spitting sparks against the iron grate. I swirled the Cabernet in my glass. It was a vintage bottle, one that cost more than the monthly rent of the apartment my parents now occupied in Tacoma. I was 25 years old. My net worth, thanks to the aggressive restructuring of the trust portfolio during the tech rally last quarter, sat comfortably at $5 million. I had started my own consulting firm. I answered to no one. The house was quiet. It was a heavy, expensive silence. There were no footsteps overhead. There was no one stealing my face cream. There was no one plotting to steal my future. My phone sat on the small side table next to my wingback chair. It began to ring. I looked at the screen. It was an unknown number. I usually let these go to voicemail, but tonight, a strange intuition made me reach for it. I swiped the green button and held the device to my ear. I did not speak. I just listened. Sa유tinghaling. Gettu. Meg? The voice was tinny, distorted by a bad connection and the background noise of clattering dishes and shouting voices. It was Bella. I did not answer. I took a sip of wine, letting the tannin coat my tongue. Meg, are you there? Bella's voice cracked. She sounded exhausted. The arrogance was gone, scrubbed away by 6 months of reality. I am on my break. I only have 5 minutes. Look, I know you hate us. I know, but Mom is sick. She has high blood pressure, and we cannot afford the medication. Dad is drinking again, and I am working double shifts at this diner. But it is not enough. My probation officer says if I miss another restitution payment, they might violate me and send me to jail. I listened to the background noise. I heard a man shouting an order for pancakes. I heard the sizzle of a grill. This was her life now. Grease, noise, and servitude. Please, Meg, she sobbed. Just a little help. I am your sister. Does that not mean anything? I am sorry. We are all so sorry. We just want to come home. I looked into the fire. I watched a log crumble into glowing ash. I remembered the hospital room. I remembered the smirk on her face when she thought I was being dragged away by security. I remembered the feeling of my own credit score collapsing. I remembered the word monster written in pepperoni on my pizza. I remembered it all. And I felt Sa유tinghaling. 2 hash is greater than nothing. The guilt I used to carry, the heavy burden of being the responsible one, had evaporated. It had been burned away by their betrayal. I am not your sister, I said, finally. My voice was calm, smooth, and utterly cold. Meg, please. Sa유tinghaling. Dinghadayu. I am the stranger you tried to rob, I said, and strangers do not pay your rent. I pulled the phone away from my ear. I looked at the screen one last time. I pressed the red button to end the call. Then, with a few taps of my thumb, I blocked the number. I placed the phone back on the table, face down. The silence returned to the library. It rushed in to fill the space where Bella's desperation had been. I took another sip of wine. It tasted excellent. Some people might say I am cruel. Some might say I am heartless. They might say that family is sacred, that forgiveness is divine. But those people have never woken up to find their own flesh and blood holding a knife to their financial throat. I was alone in a big house on a hill. I would eat dinner alone. I would sleep alone, but I would sleep soundly. I looked at my reflection in the dark window pane. The woman staring back at me was not smiling, but she was not crying either. She was fortified. She was invincible. I raised my glass to the empty room. To the monster, I whispered, and for the first time in my life, I drank to myself.